A very good evening, everyone. Institute of Electrical and Electronic Engineers, more commonly known as IEEE, is the world's largest technical professional organization dedicated to advancing technology for the benefit of humanity. IEEE and its members inspire a global community through its highly cited publications, conferences, technology standards, and professional and educational activities. IEEE has over 427,000 members in more than 190 countries, more than 60% of whom are from outside the United States. Also, there are more than 145,000 members in the IEEE community, which are student members. Furthermore, IEEE has 39 technical societies and 7 technical councils, representing a wide range of IEEE technical interests. IEEE's core purpose is to foster technological innovation and excellence for the benefit of humanity. IEEE will be essential for the global community and technical professionals everywhere, and be universally recognized for the contributions of the technology and of technical professionals in improving global conditions. With this insight, I would like to warmly welcome you all to the awareness session on UI and UX design, which is organized under the project Mora UXplore 1.0 by the IEEE Student Branch of University of Moratuwa. UI UX design is an essential part of modern-day software development and website design. UI stands for User Interface, which refers to the visual design and layout of a digital product, while UX stands for User Experience, which encompasses all aspects of how a user interacts with the experiences a digital product. A well-designed UI UX can make all the difference in creating a successful digital product that users will love. A great UI UX design should not only be visually appealing, but also easy to navigate, intuitive, and efficient. So, identifying the importance of improving standards of UI UX design, IEEE Student Branch of University of Moratuwa has launched a project, Mora UXplore 1.0, and you are joining today with us for the very first phase of this project, which is an awareness session on UI and UX design. So, without taking much of your time, I'd like to hand over the session to one of the project co-chairs of Mora UXplore 1.0. But before that, I'd like to thankfully mention our partners of this project. As our silver partner, we have Q4us, and as our official mentoring partner, we have WSO2. As our official workshop partner, we have Zone 24/7. And finally, as our technical partner, we have Virtusa. We are grateful to all of our partners for the collaborations given to us towards the success of this project, Mora UXplore 1.0. So now I invite Mr. Yazid Senarat, one of the project co-chairs of Mora UXplore 1.0, to explain about this project and what is the timeline and all other details with regards to this project. So I hand over the session to Master Yazid. Thank you.
Thank you, Jashan. Can you hear me?
Yeah, you're audible, Yazid.
Thank you. Can you see my screen as well?
Yeah, you can see your screen.
Okay, thank you, Jashan. I am Yazid Senarat. I am one of the project co-chair of Mora UXplore 1.0. So I would like to thank you all for joining with us for this awareness session. So I would like to give you a brief idea about what is this Mora UXplore event, how this event is proceed further, and event timeline, and some other important points. So first, I would like to give you an idea about what is this Mora UXplore 1.0. So Mora UXplore 1.0 is an initiative from our IEEE Student Branch, University of Moratuwa. This event is based on UI UX team. This Mora UXplore 1.0 is open to all undergraduates in any Sri Lankan university. So if anyone
Recording in progress.
if anyone is interested in UI UX and if you are also an undergraduate in any Sri Lankan university, we are warmly invite you to get registered and participate in these workshops and rounds and get these benefits. I will also tell you more information further in further slides. So this event consists of an awareness session, then 3 workshops with parallel 3 rounds, and then a final design plan, and finally with an award ceremony. So now I would like to give you a brief idea about our event timeline. As the first session, awareness session is which you are already joined with us today. After that, workshop 1 will be conducted in after that, workshop 1 will be held on 29th of April, which is upcoming Saturday, and then round 1 will be conducted on 30th of April, which is the day after the workshop day, and similarly workshop 2 and workshop 3 and round 2 and round 3 also you can see the dates and as well. Then workshop 2 will be held on May 6th and round 2 will be held on May 7th, and workshop 3 will be held on June 3rd and round 3 will be held on June 4th. These 3 workshops will be conducted through an Zoom platform, and these rounds will be conducted through our official Mora UXplore website. And then a final design plan will be held on 17th of June. Further details will be updated in further near future. And then we are planning to conclude this event with an award ceremony. So those are the dates and things that we are going to do in near future, our timeline. So then I like to get this opportunity to tell about our official Mora UXplore website, morauxplore.lk. We are planning to do most of the tasks through this website, taking registrations and then showing the leaderboards, results, and upcoming tasks like that. Everything will be, most of the thing will be done through this website. So if you haven't get registered so far, I would like to mention the main steps that you should follow when you are registering this event. First, as you can see, you should go to the morauxplore.lk website. Then you should go to the register. Then you should click the register button and go to the relevant page. In there, you should enter your team name and then email of the leader. And then you should have to verify your email. You will get an email in your inbox, and there will be a link that you will direct to a page that you can add your members by clicking that add team members button. You should direct to a page that you should enter the details of the members. In that form, you have to fill the information about your team members. The team members, 3 of your team members, including the team leader. Then after that, details submitted. So after some validation process, you will be get an email with the confirmation email with the credentials to log into your account, relevant account. By using that credentials, you can log into a relevant account. In there, your upcoming task, already finished task, and your position in leaderboard. That type of information will be this. You can get to know about those information from your relevant account. So if you haven't get registered for this event, still you haven't get registered, I warmly invite you to get registered as soon as possible and take these benefits like attendance to the workshops that done by well-reputed companies and participate in rounds and show up your skills and be the part of the best talented pool. With that, I would like to conclude my presentation. Before that, all the information that I mentioned will be there in our official website, and more important details also will be there. So I invite you to visit there and clarify your doubts and get registered. If you have further questions, please contact any of us and clarify your doubts. So thank you very much and have a great day.
Thank you, Yasid, for educating our participants regarding the Mora UXplore. Also, I would like to remind our participants that if you have an interest or passion on UX UI design, register yourself for the competitions as the registrations are now open. Up next is the moment you all have been waiting for. When it comes to UI UX design, with experience, you get expertise. Today, Mr. Omal Vijay Gunawardena and Ms. Savindi Vaduge from WSO2 are here with us to share their experiences and expertise with you all. Both Mr. Omal Vijay Gunawardena and Ms. Savindi Vaduge are software engineers of IAA team at WSO2. So without further ado, I would like to invite Mr. Omal and Mr. Savindi to take over the session to enlighten the audience with their expertise. Over to you.
Hello, am I audible? Can someone confirm, please?
Oh, yes, yeah, you're audible. Right.
Okay. One small problem. I can't share my screen. Could someone give me permission to do that?
Hello, I guess you can share your screen right now.
Yeah, I think so. Okay. Okay, it's been a while since I used Zoom. Give me a sec. Okay. Oops. Okay, can someone confirm that they can see only my slides?
Yeah, we can see your slides.
Oh, yes, only my slide. Okay, cool. So hi everyone, welcome to this awareness session. So like we were told to give a very brief idea about user experience so it can help you with your sessions that y'all are going to do practically. So we can't really cover all the aspects and principles and everything related to user experience in a short time, but we hope to give you at least a certain idea of what is user experience. And also we have funneled our content down to the design thinking process. So you can use these things in your practical sessions in the future. So I'm Savindi Vaduge, and I'm a software engineer on front-end work and user experience of our products, specifically in our IEEE product. You can search it up. So for the content that we have for today, so this is just like some basic stuff. So we will be talking about use the total user experience and then funneling down to the design thinking process, as I mentioned earlier. So let's just get on to it without taking much more time. So yeah, user experience. Is there anyone in the audience who is currently working on like thinking of becoming a UX researcher, or like someone who wants to specialize in UX? If they can give me like a brief understanding of what they think UX is, that would be great. Just if anyone wants to talk. It doesn't have to be right or wrong. There's no right and wrong answer. You can tell me anything. What do you think user experience is? Nobody? I'm audible, right? Am I talking alone? No.
No, sorry, they're audible. So
Okay. Okay, cool. No, it's fine. So yeah, it's fine. You came here to learn about it, right? So yeah, let's just get on with it. So yeah, user experience is actually it's a bit more broader than you think, right? So it's definitely not something that you can attribute just to developing a website or designing a website or any digital offerings only. So it's kind of almost everything that you do in life. So everything that you do has an experience associated with it. So it could be like a purchase that you make by going to a supermarket. It could be the restaurant that you're eating in. It could be like a park that you're walking along. It could be anything, the car that you drive or anything. So the better the experience you have with these things that you do in your day-to-day life, the better the more pleasant the experience is when you're doing these activities. There's a higher chance of you doing it over and over again, and you'll become a frequent customer of a restaurant, or you'll keep using a certain OS or a certain device when the UX of that offering is better for you, right? So it's not just about the device or like the restaurant itself. It's the point at which you start having that certain need to achieving that certain goal. So this is actually much broader, and it's about the total user experience that we ideally need to consider when we are offering something like a solution or a product or a service or anything. So yeah, as I said earlier, so although we associate user experience with digital designs and solutions, in reality, it covers a broad range of disciplines, theories, principles, and applications that we can use UX in. So we can say that UX it's available everywhere, right? So when we take a UX-driven approach, so we want we want the users to achieve like their basic goals when considering while considering the emotions that they face while when they are using your product, how they feel while doing their work or achieving their goals. So user experience considers all of these things. It takes a very holistic approach to satisfying users' needs and wants. So we want users to meet their needs without any fuss or like a bother. Simply, we want to make it enjoyable for them. So we can say that if you want to achieve good UX in a correct and a holistic way, so we must merge like different disciplines and different areas of services that we associate with our product or whatever. So it could be the customer service, it could be the design, it could be the engineering aspects, the hardware. So like that, we must consider everything from the aesthetics to the quality of the interaction with our offering. So in a very holistic way, that's how we take user experience. So this is a quote by the Nielsen Norman Group, founded by Nielsen and Norman. So they say that user experience encompasses everything, all aspects that, and users interact with the company, its services, and its products. So it's not just about the design of your product, it's about everything that is surrounding it. And yeah, so how do I make this? Has anyone I'm pretty sure like a lot of people who has trouble opening doors, right? So most of the times we end up looking stupid when we try to pull a door that's meant to be pushed, and maybe pushing it that's meant to be pulled, maybe trying to slide it when we don't have the necessary cues and stuff. That tells us how we have to operate the door, right? So this is a very basic example of somewhere we can use like good user experience. So like anyone can design the most attractive looking, very stylish looking doors, but the ordinary door user, which is like everybody, might still be unable to use it because without doing like a few trial and errors, right? So in user experience, there is a term for this, and there is a term for these kind of poorly designed doors. We call them Norman doors. So it was named after Don Norman. We mentioned him earlier also in that quote. So he's a psychologist and a UX expert, and he's also credited as the father of UX most of the times. And he's also the person who formed the term user experience. So Norman doors refers to doors that are like poorly designed and difficult for users to operate, because as you can see in this picture, like they don't really provide necessary visual or physical cues as to how they should be opened, right? Could be pushing or pulling. It could be even sliding, right? So being creative and everything is totally fine. It's totally cool. But like usability should be given importance too. And otherwise it will be like just a very bad design, or a Norman door, as we can call it. So that these things create confusion and frustration, and it also makes users look dumb and not very smart while using it. So this is another example of what happens when you don't understand the basics of user experience, right? So you can see like this brand, they come up with some good speakers, and they have a lot of advanced software, hardware, everything. They could give out clear, crisp sounds, but still it looks a bit like a trash can, right? So when there are visual cues like this, the users lose understanding of what something is intended to do. So in turn, it creates bad user experience again, right? So the user should be able to know what to do, like with these basic things, just by looking, and they should have these appropriate cues to understand what actions to perform. So in user experience, again, Don Norman calls these cues or hints as affordances. So as I mentioned earlier, if you see a door handle, you assume its function is to open a door. So when you see a light switch, you assume that it can be flicked to turn on or off. So when you see a chair, you know that it's supposed to be sat on, right? So all of these cues are known as affordances. So when we are designing with good user experience in mind, we need to consider these affordances that we offer to our users. So we need to make sure that we minimize user errors and making the experience more intuitive and understandable. And your design shouldn't mislead or surprise your user by resulting in a lack of action or an undesired outcome, right? So someone could be going and trying to throw like a coffee cup or something in this, thinking that it's a trash can, right? That's an undesirable outcome. So we don't want that. So taking all the things that I mentioned earlier into consideration, if we simplify things, right? So user experience consists mostly of It's about understanding the user and sticking to design principles. And it's about following conventions or like patterns that have been tested with trial and errors throughout many years of learning this discipline by different experts and researchers and stuff. So you don't have to go out of your way to be creative or come up with something new. You can just simply follow these patterns and stick to the design principles, and also work on understanding your users, right? So it's also about understanding how they behave, their emotions, because human beings are not perfect. They are fueled by different emotions at different times, and different people have different knowledge levels. So it's about understanding your users as well. And also, it also involves a lot of testing. We can't always assume this is what our user wants, this is what they like to do it, because our judgment and our knowledge levels could be different from our users. So it also involves a level of user testing, repetitive user testing that you can do. And you can also use user testing to identify if the affordances that you have used in your products or services or website or whatever, they are good or not, if they're actually telling the user to do the intended task, right? So that's about that. That's a very basic understanding of what user experience is, and it's a very broad subject, as you can understand, hopefully. So yeah, let's move on to UI versus UX. And for this, instead of giving an explanation by myself, I thought of showing you a video. Can someone tell me if they can see a YouTube screen, or can they still only see my slides?
We can see the video, sorry. Yeah.
Right? Okay, I'm gonna play this for you. So this nice looking lady is gonna explain to you the difference between UI and UX. She's a part of the Muse and Norman group as well. So yeah, let me play it out for you.
Our field is known for having confusing terms.
Can someone confirm if you can hear the video and see? Someone in the audience, I only hear Omar. No one is willing to talk.
Yes, we can hear the video.
Words or acronyms that sound similar and are related, but at the core mean different things. While subtle, these differences are important. The most common of these is the name of our field: user experience, UX, versus user interface, UI. What's the difference? Let's start with user experience, UX. User experience encompasses all aspects of the end user's interaction with the company, its services, its products. This means identifying and designing a solution that meets the needs of our users, regardless of medium, without fuss or bother. To do this, we must consider all aspects of the user's experience, from having the right information to ease of use to quick and concise customer help. This usually means collaborating across departments and merging the services of multiple disciplines: engineering, marketing, graphic, or industrial design. Now let's distinguish between this total user experience, UX, from what specifically the user sees, the user interface, UI. User interface refers to the specific visual touch point or asset the user interacts with. Think the look, the feel, the interactivity of a digital product. UI is the cosmetics of the experience: typography, color, spacing, grids, icons, buttons. Now, of course, UI, how something looks or feels, plays a big role in UX. So let's think about it this way. Take a look at these 3 different cakes. Each has a different user interface. What you see, the icing, the shape, the decoration, this is all UI, the presentation. It's the look and the feel, even the visible cues or suggestions for interaction, like these dollops that insinuate 1 per slice, so 6 slices per this cake. If I turn each of these around and we take a look at the inside, this is our UX. It's the cake itself. It's the core of the experience. Whether or not the cake tastes good, delivers on expectations or needs, is fully baked, and then the quality of the ingredients. Now, UX and UI go hand in hand. As a UX designer conducts research, identifies the user's core needs, creates task flows, and works through prototypes, a UI designer may compose layouts, create a visual system, and build mock-ups. A cake would look naked without the icing, and the icing has no purpose without the cake.
Okay, so the very basic understanding of what UI versus the difference between UI and UX. So yeah, so I'm not going to explain it further because of the time constraint. I hope you understood it from that video. So what is important actually? So we can say that the two terms, they overlap each other, right? So we need UI for our layouts and the typography, the color theory or whatever, everything that the buttons, how we are going to place them, the layouts, everything. And we, at the same time, we also need the to consider the user experience. So because a website can look really great, but the experience for the user can still be terrible. It could be the most nice looking, the modern looking website, but the user may not may not be able to do achieve his specific goals of what he or she wants to do with that website, right? So we need both of these things together. So both of them are really important. Okay, UX heuristics. So Jacob Nielsen, who is again one of the founders of the Nielsen-Norman group that I mentioned earlier, I keep mentioning that group. You can look it up if you want to learn about UX, right? Jacob Nielsen, he came up with 10 general principles for interaction design. So these can be considered as some broad rules of thumb. That is like, there's no hard and fast rule saying that you need to follow these things, but these are like good case practices that have been like identified by UX experts and researchers so far with a lot of experience and trial and errors and testing and research and stuff like that, right? So these are really basic, the very basic and simple rules that we usually tend to forget. Even in big corporate companies, like software companies, they can even tend to forget these very basic rules, because when the scope and the requirements and the features, they get broader and more complex, you tend to forget these very little things that helps to improve the user, maintain the level of user experience of the website or the applications or whatever. So it's always essential to keep like some principles like this in the back of your mind when you're working with your designs and products and stuff like that. So I'll quickly go through these things, just one by one. So the first principle that we have is visibility of system status. So it's about informing the user about what is going on. So for example, like when you click on a button of a form, so it takes some time for the API call to go through and to get a response. So there is a time lapse between that, right? So then in that time, you have to indicate to your user that through like a spinner or like a loading screen or something like that. So that's what you basically understand by visibility of system status. You need to communicate like what is the status of the system, because otherwise the user is going to be lost and they will lose their sense of trust in your digital offerings. So when you give appropriate feedback and in the correct time also, you can get them to trust your system, because you're much more transparent of what you're doing with your system, right? Yeah, that's the very first principle that you have to follow. And next we have, so usually, so match between system and real world. So I'll take an example, right? So you may have worked with this calculator app in your laptop. So it kind of follows the same layout as the calculators that you have used in real life, right? So the numbers starting from the bottom, 1, 2, 3, 4, and goes to the top from the bottom. So if your computer had like the computer's calculator app had a different layout, that would be confusing for the user, right? Because the user they don't just work with your app. They don't want to get used to only your app or your digital offering. They work with multiple things that may give them this that may help them achieve the same goal. So after working with these calculators for so long, when they work with a calculator app on your laptop, if they come up with a different layout, it's going to be confusing for them. So we don't want that for users. We don't need to create that unnecessary confusion, unnecessary learning cycle for them. But we can use these cues from the real world to give them a much lesser learning curve to learn the things about your product and how to achieve their goals, right? So that's about matching between styles and real world. And like you can see, like there are icons, like the shopping cart icon, it's like an actual shopping cart. We can go to the home page of your screen by showing an icon of an actual home, and search is like a magnifying glass, so things like that. Those are like the matches that we have between the real world and the system. So you can use these things whenever you can. So then we have user control and freedom. So most of the time, sometimes we are actually human, right? So we tend to do mistakes. So sometimes we look for an emergency exit, or in other words, we look for a back button or an undo button when we do something by mistake, right? Because we don't want like an unwanted action. And when we perform those actions and if it results to some undesired outcome, we get like scared, we feel stupid again, right? So we don't want that for users. We always need to give them more freedom, and we want them to feel like they are safe when they are using our products. So we want them to be able to have control over their actions. So we need to give them more freedom with these emergency exits and going back button, undo buttons and stuff like that, right? So one classic example that we can also use here when it comes to user control, it's like between Android and iOS, right? So when it comes to Android, like sometimes most people say that Android users feel like they are the admins of their devices. They are the persons in charge because they can download anything, they can customize things, and they also have the universal charging port and everything. So Android is an open source platform that it offers more freedom, customization options than iOS. So you can customize almost anything on your Android device, from how your home screen looks to how you interact with your phone and things like that. So Apple, on the other hand, it makes you feel like a user. It may give you a lot of good user experience with their software, but it makes you feel like a user, right? If you have the money and you can pay for their services and use anything you want, but you can't really download music as you please or get all the apps that you please, and you need to get certain different their own proprietary lightning connector and all that stuff. So just for your iOS device, right? So there are different things like this, small things that impact the user experience. Yes, use freedom. Next, we have consistency and standards. So it's quite obvious, right? So consistency means like you are following these different platform and industry conventions that are like easily seen by everyone in like across different platforms. For example, like if you see a website layout, you can tell that if you look at a website, you have the layout, that is the header, and then we have the navbar and we have the footer. That is the basic consistent layout that almost all the websites have used, right? But if you create a website that has the header at the bottom, so something like that, that's again going to confuse the user. It's like too much of cognitive overload. Like they have to think too much to go make their way through your website, right? We don't need that. We can simply achieve these external consistency and internal consistency by following standards and just generally accepted the layouts and these conventions. We don't need to go out of our way to come up with a different layout. Maybe it will look nicer, but the user can't achieve their goal, right? At the end of the day, that's what we want. We want usability for our users. Right? And something that supports this principle is the Jacob's law, again, and which says that people not only spend time on your device or your offering or your website. Most of the times they spend time in other websites, other devices and stuff like that. So then they get used to a certain standard. So we don't want to add to their cognitive, like the load by coming up with different overly creative things, right? So we need to maintain a certain level of consistency. And next we have error prevention. So yeah, of course, like we can show error messages, right? But if we come up with a good design, we need to make sure that we prevent those errors from happening in the first place as well. And also when it comes to like error messages, we need to avoid using like technical terms, and we don't like, we need to explain the error in a clear way that is like understandable to any person. And we also need to maybe include a line or two about how they can solve that error, right? What they can do after that error takes place. So that again creates a sense of like trust and creates a sense of reliability for your designs. So yeah, you can have like confirmation dialogues, like, are you sure you want to do this? Or when there are like things that are like deleting information or like altering any information in the database, you can always get like a confirmation from them. And you can have undo buttons, and you can also use these visual cues. You can use these maybe danger zones or something like that, maybe with a red background. You can use different fonts to indicate or hint at them that this is going to be something that is might cause an undesirable outcome for you. So you have to prevent errors from happening in the first place before it takes place. Okay, the next one, we have recognition rather than recall. So in this, there are like two words you can see, like recognition rather than recall. So, for example, I'll tell you. So imagine you're going to like a gathering, like a social gathering with a group of friends that you haven't seen in so long, or maybe like a batch party or whatever. And there's this person who's coming at you, and you maybe have met him or her like only once, maybe 10 years ago, right? So that person is coming at you and waving, and you're unable to recognize his name, or you're unable to recognize where you spoke with that person or something like that, right? But that person is still coming at you and waving, and they just start to talk to you without introducing themselves or trying to make you memorize where they met, where y'all met, what his name is or whatever, right? So then you have to keep racking your brains out thinking, okay, what is this person's name? Where did I meet him? something like that, right? But rather, if that person comes to you and introduces himself and goes like, okay, we met here, this is my name, can you remember? You ask these things, you give that person gives you more hints and cues and signals for you to remember, like, okay, this is, you recognize, you get the memory from your brain, and it makes it easier for you to recognize, right? When you get more of these hints. So the same thing applies here. When you allow a user to use your system, you need to make sure that they don't have to overly memorize different things that they have to do. But you can use these small cues and hints, and also ensure consistency, so they don't have to remember everything from one user journey to another, right? Yeah, and the seventh principle we have is flexibility and efficiency of use. So we often is the most basic thing most of the times we do when we are using a laptop or whatever. We can copy and paste, right? So this is a flexible process, this copy pasting could be done in different ways. We can right click, open up a menu, and then we can copy and paste, or we can use the keyboard and just press copy, Control C, Control V, right? So flexible processes can be done in different ways, and it could suit different knowledge levels, preferences, and even abilities of users. So this is also a principle where accessibility comes into place. So accessibility is in web development, it means that enabling as many people as possible to use websites, right? Even there are people who has different abilities and they are limited in certain ways, right? For example, so there can be users with hearing disabilities, and they use voice control to navigate a website, and like they pair it with tab navigation to go to different places and UI elements in your website, right? So we need to make sure that we offer a flexibility to different users in different levels. That is what is meant in this principle. And the eighth one, we have aesthetic and minimalist design. I mentioned this earlier also. We don't need to be overly creative, overly, like, we don't have to use too much information. We don't need to use too many animations, different colors, even from your color palette to your typography and different variations of your fonts. You don't really need to be diverse, so you don't need to add so many different variations. You can keep it to a minimum, right? You don't need to go overboard with your creativity and decorations to attract users, because at the end of the day, what the user wants is to achieve their goals easily and quickly, right? So we need to keep the usability and simplicity in mind to make sure the users achieve their goals easily, follow proper conventions, and remove information that is not necessary for the user to achieve their certain goal, if that's there. For example, there are like unnecessary pop-ups or like advertisements that are coming up in your website or whatever. Just make sure they are not bothering the user, or not giving unnecessary noise to the user to achieve their goals. And the ninth principle, so we need to help users recognize, diagnose, and recover from errors. So this is also similar to another principle that we spoke of earlier. So we can't give like cryptic codes and all the technical jargons in our error messages. We need to suggest a solution and make the user feel smart when they're using your site or app or whatever, right? So they need to have that control, that sense of trust, and that ability to trust their device enough, know that, okay, I'm smart enough to use this, I know how to use this. They need to get that sense. So they will keep coming back to using your device or your apps or whatever, right? So you need to give them a proper indication of what went wrong and how to correct the problem, right? So when it comes to a form or whatever, you can, the user may be trying to proceed with the form by not entering a certain field. So you need to clearly indicate what was missing from the form, the information, right? Clearly indicate that, and maybe you can scroll them to the place where they can add that information back to the form and then submit it, right? Yeah, the final one. So it's normally, so we spoke about like affordances and queues and everything so far that helps the users know what to do without getting a lot of like labeling and documentation and stuff, right? But so it's best if the system doesn't need any additional explanation. But there can be times that we will have to use different UI elements like popovers. You may have heard of these things, tooltips, and maybe even videos on how to use certain maybe complex operations. And there are also like chatbots and stuff like that to give more like human support to the users. And yeah, it's always helpful if you have proper documentation to your websites and apps and things like that. So when they come across something that they are having trouble with, they can always refer. And you also have to make sure that you send them to the correct place where they can get the help instantly. And like, for example, if you're adding like a learn more link or whatever with a certain feature or whatever, you have to direct that link to the certain chapter or whatever, the heading or whatever of the guide that you have. You can't just direct them to the whole guide and expect them to just go through everything and find out where to get the solution from. So you need to be specific as well when you're giving documentation. And also you need to make sure that you don't overly put too much information so that expert users who don't really need documentation, they don't need to like go through all the unnecessary information when they're performing their task, right? Yeah, so those are the 10 usability heuristics. So just keep in mind the design doesn't have to be that complicated. So as long as you understand these basic principles of user experience, you can design anything for like any user. So it doesn't only have to be like digital solutions. So we can apply these principles to any process, product or service that needs to be designed just with the human being in mind, with the user in mind. So yeah, that's my part for today's session. So without taking much more time, I'll hand over the session to Omar to continue the presentation. Thanks.
Okay, thanks, Avindi. So let me share my screen. So hope my screen is visible and I'm audible.
Yeah, Amal, your screen is visible and you're audible.
Oh, cool. Okay. So good evening, guys. So I know it's a bit late, but so I'm Omar, right? And I work as a software engineer at WSO2. Same as Samida, I'm also with the IIM team, mostly involved with front-end development, right? So without taking too much time, okay, so let's talk about something called user-centered design, right? So anyone heard of this term, user-centered design? I don't think it's very common, but can I see like a show of hands or something just to get an idea if anyone has seen or heard? Okay, fine. I don't think, okay, fine. That's okay. Because I also came to know about user-centered design while I was working at WSO2, right? So I don't expect you to understand or know that term, right? So what is user-centered design, right? So user-centered design, it seems complex, but it's actually very simple. What user-centered design is, it's pretty self-explanatory, right? So what it means is that you put your user in the center of your design, and you concentrate on the user's needs, right? So UCD, or user-centered design, it's also known as human-centered design because, I mean, your users are humans, I hope. And therefore, you can use those terms kind of interchangeably, right? So in user-centered design, you have to give attention to your users, not just while designing, but also before designing and after designing, right? Because that's how you will improve the user experience in your design, because you have to think about your users at every step of the way, right? And like before designing, you have to gather what are the requirements, right? And what are the expectations of the user. And then during the design, you have to think about whether your designs are appealing or whether your designs actually solve those problems. And after the design, you have to test it with your users, whether these solutions that you have provided actually solves the problems of the user, right? So that is why we say that we need to give attention to our users at every step of the design phase. Okay, so this is an example for a bad design, right? Like Savindra said, it's not about software, right? So everything around you, anything that you use, anything that you interact with it has a user experience, right? It can be your coffee mug, it can be your mobile phone, or it could be like this, the path you take, when you are going from home to your uni or office, right? So this is like, even though those engineers, right, they have put a lot of effort and built this footpaths, the people tend to take the shortcut, right? Because so this is like UI and UX, right? So it looks nice, right? So but people tend to prefer the shortcut because it's easy, right? Like it takes a lot, it like saves like maybe 5-10 seconds, but at the same time it's less effort, right? So people tend to take this footpath. So like this can be good for people like who maybe who are jogging, right? So or maybe who is going in a wheelchair. So this path is okay, but for like general people, right, lazy people like me, we will take the shortcut. Can anyone tell me a way that we can improve this footpath, right? Or how we can improve the user experience in this scenario? Like, it's okay, right? So it's okay to give wrong answers. I mean, there are no wrong answers, right? So I have an answer in mind. So your answer might be better than that, right? So can anyone tell? I know it's like 7:30, so people are falling asleep. It's raining also. So why don't like some of you tell how can we improve user experience in this? It's very simple. Anyone?
Can we like use the interlocks for the footpath as well?
Yeah, exactly, right? So I mean, it's very simple, right? You just use the same kind of a footpath there, right? So that will kind of save the greenery around it as well, and it won't get muddy and all that. And people are also happy because now their shortcut is kind of better, right? So like that. So engineers also kind of like software engineers, we are all engineers, right? So developers as software engineers, they try to make the user interfaces very nice, right? And colorful. They can have lots of animations and stuff. But sometimes those very things can lead to bad UX, right? So like that's why sometimes we say less is more, right? We have to design in a way that it's appealing, sure, but at the same time, it shouldn't disturb the UX of the product, right? So that your fellow colleague said, so we can pave this path and improve the UX, right? So that will not harm the joggers or the people. Some people might want to get to the next side of the street, so they have to use that. So like that, we should be more inclusive with our design, right? So that is that. And then, okay, so this is an example for a good design. So I'm pretty sure you have used this kind of UI in taxi apps like Uber or PickMe, right? Where it shows the location of your driver, right, in real time, and it's going to tell where he is or what's your estimated time, right? And also like how much you get charged and all of that, right? So now imagine I built a taxi app, right? Which doesn't say, sometimes the estimate might be off, right? So it doesn't matter. I won't say that there's an estimated time, or it doesn't say where the driver is. It just says, okay, your driver is on the way, right? So that's kind of unsettling, right? Because the software or the application is not giving you enough feedback, right? But this is a very good design, right? So it shows your remaining time. It even shows the average speed. And, if the driver is stuck in a traffic jam, it's going to say that, he's stuck in a traffic jam. It's going to take a bit more longer, like that. So it's a very good design. It's a good design, not just because it looks good, but also because of the user experience, right? It gives you enough feedback, and you're kind of confident, and it assures you that, that there's a drive on the way and all that. So they have solved it with a very nice design along with good user experience. So, okay, so how can we come to that kind of a good design, right? So because like if you really think about it, if you want to build an application, right, ideas doesn't come to your mind just like that, right? It takes time, and also to come up with the great design, it's even harder, right? So how do we come up with this great design, right? So like everything else, we have a process for this, and that's called the design thinking process, right? So the design thinking process has mainly 5 steps. You have empathize, define, ideate, prototype, and testing. So we'll take each step and see what each of these steps mean to you, right, as developers. Okay, so first we have empathize. So we have heard the word empathy, right? So what does that mean? What empathy means to you? Can someone tell me? Preferably someone who didn't answer before, right? So what does empathy means to you? Right? So it means to you, right? There's no right answer. You can even Google, right? So what does empathy means? And there's another word called sympathy. So there are 2 different things, right? So what is empathy? Can anyone tell me? Anyone? Yeah, I'll give 5 seconds to answer. So okay, so looks like there's no one who knows the word empathy, right? Okay, so what empathy means is, it's very simple, right? So empathy means the ability to understand and share the feelings of another person, right? Or a set of persons. So in our case, empathizing means we should be able to understand and share the feelings of our users, right? So how our users feel. So if we know how our users feel, it's very easy for us to develop a product that is appealing for them, right? But the problem is, we don't know our users, right? So let's say you make a product, you make an application, you put it in the App Store. You don't know the people who downloads your application, right? So you need, how do you understand the feelings of users? So if it's your friend or if it's someone from your family, then of course it's easier for you to empathize because you know that person. So how do you empathize a person who you don't know, right? So we are empathizing these people who are complete strangers to us, right? By getting qualitative data, right? So qualitative data means you have to interview your users, right? And you have to observe your users, right? And you have to ask them actually what they feel, what they want, right? That is the only way to empathize with your user base, right? Because you don't know them. And then ultimately you have to understand what your users really need, right? So why do we need empathy, right? So we can just, we have we have an idea in mind, we can go ahead and implement it, right? So empathy is important because we need to have empathy to see the world from other people's perspective, right? So if you understand how your users feel, if you can put yourself in the shoes of other users, then you can design things, you can develop things that are relatable to them, right? You can make designs that makes them feel good, right? And that is what we call a good user experience. So I'll give you an example, right? So there are certain applications, right? Or it could be, it could be an application, right? So if it can relate to you, let's say you made some kind of a mistake, right, in the application, and somehow because of the user experience of that application is good, that application prevents you from doing something like that is not right, by mistake. So the best example that you can get is, this is a very basic example, right? So you type an email in Gmail. If you say in an email, I have attached with this document in this mail, and if you forget to attach something, it's going to tell you, right? And that is kind of relatable to you, right? So that the user experience is so good that it kind of has your back. You feel that the application has your back. So that kind of a trust goes a long way when it comes to software, right? That's why Google is the #1 search. A lot of people use Gmail, so there are plenty of other options, right? You have Yahoo, you have this Outlook and all other new Gmail, not Gmail, other email clients, but a lot of people tend to use that. Why? Because the user experience is good, right? There's no other reasons, because everything is free and all the emails does the same thing. But why we use Gmail? Because the user experience is good, right? Okay, so then the next step of this is to define, right? Define means, once you have understood all the users' needs, right, and their thoughts, at least to some extent, we don't have to understand everything. You have to define the problem that you're trying to solve, right? The whole point of creating a software is to solve something, right? So if you think about it, all the apps you use kind of solve some kind of an issue. Or sometimes there can be applications which creates problems, but that's a different story. But most of the applications, right? So you use WhatsApp, that is to communicate with people. The problem is you need to communicate easily and in a cost-effective manner. So that's your problem. Then you have Uber. Your problem is you have to get to different places, but you don't have a vehicle, but you don't like to use public transport as well. So you have Uber, right? Same goes for Pick Me. And you have Uber Eats. If you get hungry, or if you are craving for something, you can get something. Those problems are solved by software, right? So the important thing is, once you get to know your user base, once you empathize them, you have to define your problem very clearly, right? That is very important, because if you didn't define your problem right, then you are trying to solve that problem. If your problem is not correct, or if it is something else, you are trying to solve a different problem entirely, right? And when you put out the product, it's not going to solve that user's problem, right? It's going to solve some other problem. So the user end up kind of even more disappointed on your product because that is not the expectation, right? So it's very important to get your problem statement right. That's the number one thing, right? Once you have identified the problem, you have to build something called user personas, right? We'll talk about that in the next slide. And also using these user personas, you have to write user stories, right? So these are kind of interrelated. You define your problem. Around that problem, you build your user personas. Using those user personas, you build your user stories. Okay. So what is a user persona, right? So it is a fictional character, right, that represents the needs of a large group of users. Ideally, this should be a character which has the problem that you have identified in the first place, right? It's a fictional character which has that problem, and we need to develop these user personas so that it's easier for us to relate, right? So it's rather than just defining, writing, okay, this is the problem. It's much easier if you take a person and give that problem to that person, and then you kind of write a story about it, right? And when you're doing that, you're looking at the bigger picture. So you tend to see more problems it has, or you tend to see more solutions, because it's a kind of a more rich experience there. So ideally, around 3 to 8 user personas can cover a product user base, right? So it doesn't have to be that amount. Any number of user personas can be there. There can be only one user persona, right? That's totally depending on the problem that you're trying to solve. So this is an example of a user persona, right? So there is a problem, right? The problem is, let's say, there's this guy, Michael, right? He's 24 years old. He's a personal trainer. And this is his problem. I always forget to drink enough water when I'm training the clients, right? So that's his problem. So with these problems, he gets some frustrations, right? So frustrations are like he spends more time with the clients so often that he forgets to drink water. And because of that, he's kind of concerned about water retention, and you can get dehydrated, especially in this kind of weather, right? We need to keep our bodies hydrated. So as Michael, because of this problem, right, he has some goals, right? He needs to track the daily water intake, and also he needs reminders to drink water periodically. So by combining this problem with the user persona, right, you can come up with this kind of a statement. Michael is a 24-year-old personal trainer from Boulder City, Nevada, who spends 12 to 15 hours a day at the gym with the clients. And Michael wants to track his daily water intake, and he needs reminders to drink water to avoid retention, right? So this is a kind of a, we are trying to develop a story here, right? With the problem and the user persona. So based on that user persona, we are developing user stories, right? As the name suggests, right? So they are stories about our users, right? But they can't be like a novel or a book like that. They should be just one sentence long, right? Because it should be very clear and concise, right? As developers, we don't have time to read like lengthy stories, right? We need one sentence long, and we have to tell that in first person user's perspective. That means in our Michael's perspective, we have to tell that story. So by developing these user stories, they will help us to empathize with our users, right? Even more, because like I said, there's a rich story, right? So even, you kind of get attached to that, and you think like Michael. So, and that will influence our design decisions, right? So how do we write a story, right? So like in every story, doesn't have to be a user story. There is a hero, right? And there's a goal, and there's a conflict. This is very much similar to something you see in, Marvel or DC movies, right? There's a hero has some goals, and there's a conflict, right? Like that. So that is how we write the user story. But this should be one line, right? So let's take an example. So we'll take Michael's problem, right? So Michael is a personal trainer, right? So we can write a user story like that. As a personal trainer who works 12 to 15 hours, now that is the hero, right? So, and I want to remind myself to consume enough water periodically. That is the goal, right? So now we have the hero and the goal, and the conflict is that so that I do not become dehydrated, right? So you too can develop user stories like that. I'm sure you will develop plenty of user stories in your upcoming competitions as well, right? So like that, it will help you to understand your problem as well as the solution a bit more with more context, right? Then you have defined your problem, right? You know what your users are, you know what your users need, you know what your user's problem is, right? Now, the next step is ideation, right? So you know your problem really well, right? To come to ideation, you should be 100% sure about the problem that you're trying to solve, because this is where you try to find potential solutions to that problem. If you have the wrong problem, you will have wrong solutions, right? So ideation is all about gathering as many ideas as you can and come up with a wide range of potential solutions, right? Sometimes these solutions might be, crazy and it sounds stupid. That's okay. You just list them down, right? Sometimes the craziest solutions are the kind of best solutions that you can give, right? So one of the methods that you can do ideation is brainstorming, right? So I don't think I have to explain what brainstorming is, right? It's basically a method that is used by not just design teams actually, right? By any team to generate ideas to solve a clearly defined design problem, right? So it's very important to define it clearly first, and then you work on generating ideas to solve this problem, right? Okay, so let's say you have a problem, you have your users, right? And then you have come up with a solution as well, right? So out of those generated ideas, you take the best solution, right? Okay, let's say the solution is to create an app, right? Which gives you hourly reminders, right? And it kinds of calculates how much water intake do you want based on your activity, body weight, and all that, right? And then something like that. Okay, so now you have the solution, but solution alone is not enough, right? So you have to actually implement that. Before implementing, we do something called prototyping, right? Here we develop a skeleton or a blueprint of your solution. We don't develop the full solution, right? We just come up with the basic design of this, or maybe a little bit of prototyping, right? Maybe some, screens, what are the pages that you have, like the user flows and all that. You can do that in this prototyping stage, right? This is where you actually starts to implement, right? So if you really look at it, right? So you don't go and implementing right away, right? So you have to do a lot of research first and then start implementing, because otherwise, if you start implementation first, what's going to happen is when you come to somewhere in the middle of your development, you find that, okay, something's wrong. I have identified the problem wrong. So you have to scrap all of that and you have to start over, right? So that is why it's very important to understand the problem and the solution first. So when it comes to prototyping, there are different prototypes, right? But mainly there are two kinds of prototypes, right? So we call those as the fidelity of the prototype, right? So they can be either low fidelity or low-fi or high fidelity, or we call it hi-fi. So low fidelity is kind of low cost, right? It's kind of easy to build, like quick to build, And it's kind of a very basic kind of a prototype. Like in this slides, you can see on the left side, you have a low fidelity prototype, or we call them as like wireframes also. So it doesn't have colors or anything, right? It just have the overall, the layout of the product, right? Where things go, where will the buttons go, where will the images go, like that, right? So then we have high fidelity prototypes. High fidelity prototypes, they are very polished. They are much closer to your final product, very detailed, but they're also more costly and more time consuming, right? So ideally, you should start with the low fidelity prototype, finalize it, and then build your way to the high fidelity prototype, right? Because if you start with a high fidelity prototype, it takes a lot of time, and since it's the very beginning, it will take a lot of iterations to get it right? So that means you are spending more time and more energy on these prototypes. So rather than that, just finalize the low fidelity prototype, and then you come up with the high fidelity prototype, right? So you can use lots of tools for this, right? For instance, for low fidelity prototypes, you can use things like even Figma. You can use Figma, you can use for both, right? Adobe XD, you can use for both, but for low fidelity ones, you can use, there's something called Balsamiq, like that. So these are some of the tools, right? So you can easily find these tools. Lots of most of them are like free of charge. Just Google, right? Low fidelity prototype software or something like that, or just ask ChatGPT, right? So that's kind of the trend. So you can find a lot of cool software that you can create prototypes very easily. So once you have come up with the prototype, right? So like I said before, user-centered design, right? So we were centering, or we were focusing on the users before, during, and after. So this testing part comes in to focus on your users after you have created a design, right? So once you have come up with a prototype, you need to test that with your users, right? So you have defined your problem, okay? You have defined a solution, but you still don't know whether this is the actual problem that the user needs. If it is, good, right? But what if it's not, right? So you can't put this straight to production like that. So you have to test it with users, right? So that's why we have those, sometimes you have these programs called open betas, right? Closed betas, or maybe you just select a set of users and then you roll out this product to a selected set of users, and then you get their feedback, right? So because why we do this is to check whether our design thinking process, starting from empathizing, defining, ideating, prototyping, right? All that has created a product that is actually useful for the user, right? And that is user-friendly. If it's not, that means we are doing something wrong, right? So that means we have to scrap all of that, and you have to go again back to the drawing board, start with the empathizing, and you have to work your way up, right? And see what has gone wrong, and you have to improve it. You have to retry it. So also we have to determine that these improvements, right? Sometimes, okay, sorry, I was in the previous slide. So why do we need to test, right? So because we have to identify the usability and the accessibility of these products as early as possible, right? So anyone can tell me, like, what's the difference between usability and accessibility? Anyone? Okay, so because of time constraints, I will answer it myself. So usability is basically how usable your product is, right? No matter who the user is, whether this product is usable in general, whether anyone can use this. Accessibility is for differently able people, right? So who might have a different way of interacting with your software. So how do they use that software? So you have to determine these issues as early as possible, right? You can't put the software to production and then find usability issues, and then either you have to roll back or you have to patch it, right? But even so, you are still going to get very bad experience or bad reviews from your customers or from your users because you have rolled out like kind of an unusable product or an inaccessible product, right? So we know how to do that. So we by testing, we kind of try to mitigate those things, right? And also we have to check, like I said, whether this design satisfies their needs, right? So rather than assuming stuff, right? I know it's kind of a, like we assume that that's the problem. What's the problem in the beginning, right? So we have to see that whether this assumption is matched to their needs, right? And at the same time, we have to see whether this reveals any unexpected things, unforeseen things that you didn't see before, right? During empathize stage. And if you uncover something like that, you may have to refocus. You have to go through that design thinking process again and see how you can align your software or product to this newly uncovered insights, right? So because of these reasons, it's very important for you to test your solution before releasing to the market. And that's kind of it for the design thinking process, right? We have a little bit more to go, right? This is something that is additional to the design thinking process, right? So there can be people who, like to become a UI UX designer, or it could be a UI UX engineer also, right? So let's see what is the role or what kind of duties does a UI UX designer have when they work with these concepts every day, right? So as a UI UX designer, most of your time will be spent on user research, right? And information gathering. Because like I said, it's very important to correctly identify your problem and solution at the very early stages, right? If these are wrong, your whole product will be useless. And because it is trying to solve some problem which is not there, right? Or which is not a problem at all. So research is very, very important, right? So it's like 80%, 70% research and 30% of implementation, right? So once you have done this research, right? So then you can create wireframes, prototypes, right? So similar to the design thinking process. And then you come up with the best possible UI with the best possible UX that you can, right? Now, since this is a UI UX designer, it's not exactly a developer, right? So that is why this effective communication parts comes into play. I mean, even if it's an engineer, yes, that is important. But since designer does designing and engineer does the implementation, it's very important for the designer to effectively communicate their findings, right? And their designs and say that, okay, this is the problem. This is the solution. These are the designs. This is how it should be done, right? If there is a miscommunication, again, the outcome or the product is different to what is expected by the UI UX designer. So that means it's different to the problem. That means that is different to the problem that is, or the need of the user, right? The end user. Or there can be a case where you are the both designer as well as the engineer. So in that case, you design, you develop, right? So that's kind of how we do things at WSO2, right? We kind of do both design as well as development. So these are kind of things that we do every day, right? So, okay. So that's it for the session, right? I think we kind of finished it early because, it's even presentation, it's all about user experience, right? So we don't want just to hang around much at this time, right? So thank you very much for patiently listening, right? So, and if you have any questions, you can ask from me or Savindi, right? So yeah, thanks guys. Okay, I think there are no questions. So if there's any, we'll share this slide with you. So it has our, you know, social media links and stuff. So you can reach to us at any time. So, right. Me and Samindi both. So yeah. So thanks guys for listening, and have a good night.
Yeah, thank you very much, Mr. Amal and Ms. Savindi. So for those insightful words and for those in detailed explanations, we are very much grateful to both of you for being here with us today amidst your busy schedules. And we have a small token of appreciation for both of you. First, I'd like to invite Mr. Amal to receive his token of appreciation.
Okay, so what am I supposed to do? Okay, all right. Okay. Thanks, guys.
Thank you very much. Yeah. So, and Ms. Savindi, I invite you as well to receive your token of appreciation for joining with us today for this awareness session.
Thank you, guys.
Okay, so once again, thank you very much for being there for us today. So as we have come to today's end of today's proceedings, I have a small request. I invite all the participants of today's session to turn on their cameras for a virtual group photograph. And we'll be sharing a Zoom background in the chat. If you are willing to turn on your cameras, use the Zoom background as well. Yeah, on the count, the photograph. So 3, 2, 1. Thank you very much, guys. So every good thing must come to an end. So before we conclude today's session, I'd like to remind you all to once again to get registered for the competitions. as the registrations are now open. Also, once again, I'd like to thankfully mention all our partners for this project. As our silver partner, we have Q for Us, and as our official mentoring partner, we have WSO2. As our official workshop partner, we have Zone 24/7, and as our official technical partner, we have Virtusa. We are very much grateful for all the partners for the collaborations given to us towards the success of this project. And a very big thank you to all the participants who joined today for the awareness session. Without you, this session won't be a success. I'm Randimal Jashan, signing off for today. Thank you and have a good night.